I think it can be kind of useful to back out of your kind of biases about artificial intelligence and try to approach them from a more neutral standpoint. I think it's fine to have really hard, like, kind of philosophies about artificial intelligence. And honestly, like, I see both sides. I understand people who are very anti AI, and I understand people who are, accelerationists functionally. I get both sides of it. And I've seen compelling arguments from both. What I've tried to do over the last couple of months is back out of my own kind of preconceived notions and biases about AI and approach it from the perspective of, okay, this is a tool. Let's see what this tool is good at. Like, if you really, really like have this strong opinion about something and never really take the time to interrogate it and kind of figure out, the realities of it, I don't think you can really develop like a strong understanding of what the tool is. So I've been trying to do that with artificial intelligence. At first, I was using Cursor, and I said, okay, well, let's do a real like attempt at a deep dive at using Cursor and LLMs for coding. And at first, it was god awful. Like, I was prompting the composer within Cursor to try to like refactor a large code base, several, like, a, 2 or 3 dozen files and, a couple thousand lines of code. And it did not do well at all. I think it was a matter of like the context being too large and it just kind of getting confused between files, but it did not do well. So I said, okay, let's switch gears and let's figure out how we can use Cursor well for coding, because tons of people are. I knew that I wasn't some like random exception that just could never figure it out. So I started poking around with it. And what I found was that Cursor is very, very good at writing functions that are a couple dozen lines long at max, like very fairly small functions. It is very, very good at refactoring single functions. It's okay at refactoring single like files of code, and it is incredibly good at autocomplete. So it can write, things like, for loops fairly well. It can find out what exactly it is that I want to log out to the console or into my logs incredibly well. I use it to write all of my logs now because it's that good. That saves me like half of a second to a couple of seconds every time I write a line of code that logs something. But like, I write a ton of logs, so like that really starts to add up. Things like for loops, building just a quick boilerplate for loop, very useful. And these are things that I don't worry about like forgetting. I'm not going to forget how to write a line of code that logs things out. I'm not going to forget how to write a for loop, more than likely. So I tried to take that same approach to figuring out how to use Claude for business strategy. And that one was interesting. I had several very long conversations with Claude trying to figure out exactly what Claude was good at for strategy development and, different things like that, and what it was bad at. And what I found is that Claude does not understand markets very well. It does not understand money very well. It doesn't understand like marketing spend very well. These kinds of like much more in the weeds minutia around business strategy, not very good at that. I gave it two different business ideas that I had and said, I'm trying to develop a business with, these two, business applications in mind. And it said, okay, well, here's how you can synergize those two. Here's how they can work together. It was my honeypot project and this Web3 data mining project that I'm working on. Neither of those things could realistically ever synergize. They're not going to work together. That doesn't make sense. But it was trying to like shoehorn them into working together because from a high level, it does make sense if you've got several different business applications to try to make them work together. And that is something that I am trying to do, but you can't just shoehorn two business ideas into some kind of relationship that doesn't work. It wasn't good at that. It was not very good at coming up with like realistic business ideas without like some fairly limiting prompting. So for example, if you just tell it, come up with 10 business ideas in the cybersecurity industry, most of them are bad. Like, not just like bad, but like never going to be doable. Some of them are okay, and some of them spurred some kind of like thinking in my mind, kind of down chain. So it was like, okay, well, this business idea is garbage, but I can develop it into something else. I can kind of pivot and take it in a different direction, and that was useful. It was fairly good at coming up with ideas for content marketing. If I gave it an existing business idea and told it I want to, use content marketing strategies to kind of, market this out, it was fairly good at coming up with like, decent content marketing ideas. It was very, very bad at coming up with like ideas of spend. Why are people's trucks that loud? It was very bad at coming up with like the minutia, like, like how much money I'm going to spend. So like, for example, on a given business plan that I developed, it said you're going to spend like $40,000 on software licenses. Like, why the hell would I do that? $40,000 in the first year on software licenses? No, that's never going to happen. And it meant like actual licenses. I'm not talking about like infrastructure spend. It said licenses. That was weird. That was very weird. Things like marketing spend was like, you're going to, I told it that I wanted to focus primarily on content marketing, but, maybe run some paid ads. And it was like, okay, you're going to spend $30,000 on paid ads. I was like, what the hell? Why? That doesn't make any sense. So like these kind of minutia, very bad at. Coming up with business ideas that make sense, fairly bad at it. If you give it ideas for content, or if you give it ideas for like a business that you want to build and that you've already kind of validated logically, pretty good at running with that and building like a business development plan. Like it took some tweaking to get it to work right and for it to make sense, but it was pretty good at it. The way that I am now kind of envisioning this is LLMs are fairly good at being your friend who smokes a lot of weed and decides that they're really good at business. And they're fairly good at rubber ducking. And what rubber ducking is basically serving as like a thing that you can, basically just spit out ideas at and kind of flesh your ideas out a little bit by just kind of talking to yourself. Claude's good at that. It's good at being your like friend who has really, really dumb business ideas that you can kind of like take and run with in a completely different direction. I think that can be valuable, but I think like expecting it to spit out a business idea that you can then go and execute just like verbatim, it's not there yet. I don't really know why it lacks the logical understanding to like get you there and to really do well at that. I don't know. It's probably because honestly, it hasn't been trained on a ton of like internal business details, so it doesn't know how much it would be realistic to spend on, paid ads if your primary focus is content marketing. It doesn't really know how much software licenses cost, just that they do cost money. So I think that might be part of the problem. It probably does not have a ton of training data available for like realistic numbers there. But it's okay at coming up with more high level things that you are going to need to tweak a fair bit to get like realistic. And I think, in and of itself, it's not going to be like my primary business planning tool by any stretch, but I think it is like fairly useful to have just kind of a rubber ducky and a friend with dumb ideas to kind of get the creative juices flowing. So that's kind of the direction that I'm going to take it with. AI for coding, honestly, I'm using it a ton, and that's, really nice. I'm not building stuff just straight up using AI, but it has become part of my workflow, and that's been really nice. Generating Docker files, it's actually really good at that. That's been nice as I've kind of been learning more about Docker. But yeah, that's about it. I'm kind of learning more about what the world's going to look like. Take it easy. Peace.